when we have this awareness and we have the tools to deal with our stuff, that's when we can do something about it.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health Counseling and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt, the vice president in charge of our BHIS, Behavioral Health in-Home Service that works with children. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So our guest today is Kristy Kilcup. She is a certified hypnotherapist. She is a certified ICF coach. She is a certified hypnotherapist with the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. And she is a certified health and life coach with the Health Coach Institute. She works individually with women specifically, looking at each individual person's unique hormone blueprint, helping people to overcome those limiting fears, those limiting beliefs, those experiences that we've had and how we've interpreted them, and helping the women that she works with to get unstuck and start thriving. So welcome, Kristy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So now tell us about hypnotherapy and how it relates with the counseling world.
So I really got interested in hypnotherapy. I've been through counseling myself. I spent a number of years going through counseling. I think for me, what attracted me to hypnotherapy was that discomfort that I felt in being vulnerable and having to share my feelings. That was always kind of a barrier for me. Even though I worked with my therapist for a while and got really comfortable with her, still for me, myself, just going into my own emotions, talking about my own past, trying to articulate myself, I always struggled with that. And so hypnotherapy attracted me because it gave me access to information and feelings that would allow me to articulate myself clearly and effectively without feeling that sense of panic that I was having in having to be vulnerable in those moments.
Interesting. So can you kind of explain how that works for people who have never done hypnotherapy, like becoming vulnerable with their feelings without feeling vulnerable?
Yes. So I guess the way that I would best describe it is you still feel the feelings. It would be like the three of us watching a rom-com, if you will, where we'll watch this movie on the TV and we'll cry and we'll feel the feelings, but it's not like we're experiencing those feelings again. So it's from that dissociated state of being where we're very much aware of what's going on. We feel sorry for the people, we're very empathetic to the cast of characters, but we also know that it's not happening to us in that moment of time. And so because of that, they're able to relate their experiences from any of that past regression or any of the past circumstances that they're able to pull up during that session to their present circumstances a lot faster, and I think with more ease, if that makes sense.
So it's similar to if we think about going time travel or A Christmas Story, right? Where Ebenezer Scrooge goes back in time and sees himself as a young man. If we think about going back into our own past, it would be the difference between me at 38 going back and looking at 4-year-old and 6-year-old and 7-year-old Julie versus going back in time and being 4-year-old and 6-year-old and 7-year-old Julie?
Yeah, you know what? I actually really appreciate how you articulated that, because that's exactly it. Is you get to watch the experience happen in front of you, and we're very cognizant of that. Like there's a lot of messaging around, you're not reliving this experience. You see it coming up in front of you like a computer screen warming up, for instance, and suddenly the picture is there. So we're very clear as to how this scene comes to you, so that you realize that you're watching it from a different point of view. And so when my clients are pulled out of the hypnotherapy session, oftentimes they'll say, yeah, I didn't know that I was hypnotized until you pulled me out. Because, they'll scratch their nose if their nose is itchy, they'll wipe their face if they feel a tear running down their face. But they also notice that maybe they were talking like in a childlike voice. And they could hear themselves talking like that, but they realized that that they weren't feeling those feelings the same way. And so it is that sense of dissociation that, from my experiences at least, have really allowed for us to kind of dial down the intensity of that sense of vulnerability that we experience when we go deep.
How do you hypnotize somebody? I know, like, I picture like moving the thing or like flashing lights. So what does it look like for somebody who's never been to a hypnotherapy session?
Okay, so I'm going to throw you off even further and tell you that all of my hypnotherapy is done online.
Interesting.
I know. So it's really, I like to explain it that it's very similar to you being in a meditation. So you could have like an instructor, like in a yoga studio, for example, you're lying down on the ground and they're walking you through different relaxation techniques. I would essentially do the same thing and take you through this induction process where, let's say you're working with me and you're either in your bedroom, lying on your bed or on your couch, or maybe you're even just sitting up against the wall, or you're sitting in your chair. Or I even had a client take a session with me in their parking lot because they had to go back to work afterwards. But the convenience of you doing it anywhere you feel safe, and then I will induce you into more or less of this kind of meditative like state, that just makes it a lot easier for you to access information that's available to you, but that our logical mind, like our police officer brain, tries to stop us from really paying attention to.
Wow. So online,
Yeah.
and which is like you said, so different, I think, from the stereotypical hypnotherapy situation. Chrissa was saying the clock swinging back and forth. I picture like Robin Hood with the snake eyes. Yeah, and the snake eyes, and after proms where people cluck like a chicken and those things. And so our culture has so much about hypnotherapy kind of built into it. And so what you're doing is you're bringing the science to kind of those ideas that we see in those movies.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been doing this for 30 years. You've been in this field. How has your understanding of the way that our brains work progressed over those 30 years?
Yeah, so I've been in the health and wellness world for the past 30 years. I think what I've really noticed is it's a similar trend over and over and over again, in that when it comes to what it is that we want, it seems to be easier for us to just spend the time wishing for it than to actually doing anything about it. And the tools that we've had over the course of the decades have been enhanced for certain. And we've really started to recognize that mental health is something that, is okay. It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to seek help, and it's okay to talk about it. And I really love how the strategies have really adopted to giving, in my case, it's clients, not patients, but patients and clients alike, the opportunity to recognize that they do have the resourcefulness inside of themselves to advocate for themselves and to take initiative. And that while it may be scary, and while we spend so much time wishing for change, but not taking action, that when we actually learn with the help of a counselor, therapist, hypnotherapist, whatever that looks like, coach, that they actually start to learn to advocate for themselves. And that whole process of the journey of these, this forward momentum and taking these steps forward really does become easier. But the underlying trend from, decades and decades ago is us standing in our own way, us listening to the con artist brain that justifies staying stuck versus leaning into what is absolutely scary and uncomfortable for 60 to 90 minutes once a week to get over, so you're not reliving more decades of the same experiences. I think that's really what this journey has really been about. And regardless of the learnings, regardless of the tools, it's always just, what's the best method for this particular human to allow them to get out of their own way so they can experience the benefits of counseling, therapy, coaching, hypnotherapy.
Yeah. And you mentioned too that you focus on each client's unique hormone blueprint. Can you explain how that works and what that means?
Yeah, so I focus on personalized health as well. So I work with women's epigenetics. Our bodies are designed very differently from each other. Women in particular with our hormone fluctuations that happen every month, right? And so what ends up happening is the times of day that you should be exercising, the type of exercise that you should be doing, the type of food that you should be eating, when you should spend your time focusing your attention on very detailed tasks, what you need in particular to really de-stress from the day are uniquely specific to your dominant hormone traits. So there are really 6, I would say, somatotypes, if you will. And within those 6, there are thousands of variations. And why I say this to you is because as a health coach and, having done this for years and years and years, you would work with me as your personal trainer. We would put a plan together to talk about your nutrition and your exercise, and we would trial it to see what works best for you. And then you bring your best friend, and your best friend does the same program. You both try the same ketogenic diet because it's working for them, so it's going to work for you too. And then it doesn't. And we internalize those failures as something that we've done wrong. But what the epigenetics blueprint really does is it helps us to identify exactly what your biology needs, what your chronobiology suggests. I am somebody who used to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go work out. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I couldn't deal with life. I couldn't self-regulate. I'd almost be like in the corner in fetal position going, not another meeting. I can't talk to another person. I just couldn't cope with people. It was too people-y out there. What I learned is with my epigenetics, I need a chill morning. If I have my chill morning, I can let my cortisol release, in that 3 to 6 p.m. time frame, work out really hard then within the parameters of what works best for me. And then I can see the results. So as long as I give myself permission, grace, and space to follow my hormone blueprint, then I'm a way more productive citizen. And I'm also a nicer human. And if you're working with me, it takes me less time to get my point across. So I'm not wasting your time or mine.
So how do you do the mapping? Is it a saliva test? How does that work?
Yes. You know what? I really appreciate that question because first of all, there's no DNA testing at all. There's no invasive procedure. What it is it's based on anthropometric measurements, in all honesty, as well as a health assessment. And so the company that I work with, that I've partnered with, they've been doing this whole R&D on epigenetics and all of the different sciences that go into this. I want to say for the past 20 years, but it could actually be longer than that. And so what ends up happening is it takes you about 30 minutes. You do your assessment online. So I'm all about convenience, as you can see. you do your assessment online, you essentially get this encyclopedia of you. So there's a ton of information that you get to learn about yourself. Some of it you're going to be like, yeah, I kind of knew that. But we force ourselves into boxes because we think that if it worked for somebody else, it should work for us. So you get this encyclopedia of you, and then you work with me to decipher the code and to start to create the habits so that you can align your lifestyle with what's best for your body.
Interesting. So you said epigenetics a lot, and I have no idea really what that means. Can you explain the definition of that?
Yeah. So epigenetics is really just that expression of your genes. So when you're in traffic, your genes will express themselves differently than mine will, possibly. Where you're in traffic and you're like, I don't care if it takes me 2 hours to get there. Whereas when I'm like 2 minutes in traffic, I am seething. So the expression of our genes will be very different. Or if you have an emotional trauma, for example, and you have like an easy button when somebody says something to you, mine is relaxed, like relax. Or if I feel dismissed, right? My epigenetics will express themselves in such a way that's different than other people, and that's what makes me unique. That's what makes you unique. I'm of course using myself because I'm just very familiar with my habits and my behaviors, but we would all have these unique traits where we can start to become more compassionate with ourselves. There is a somatotype where they need to communicate, and we would talk about those people as they're just very passionate. But they need to be able to feel like they're in an environment where they can safely communicate their feelings. When they can't safely communicate their feelings, then that's when they end up feeling this sense of anxiety. That's when they feel like they don't belong. That's when they start to self-deprecate because they just can't find kind of their people. But when they find just 2 or 3 people that they can really establish a really wholesome, safe relationship with, then they are the types of people that will connect others and will bring people into the mix and will love upon everybody.
There's a theme here of exploring who we are at our very base level and then accepting that and letting our world be built around who we are versus trying to change and fit ourselves into the world around us.
Yes.
And even, gosh, I'm looking at your background, and as you're talking, it's just coming to me how you are living this, because your background seems very, very personalized. Like that's the kind blues and yellows and whites. Like that is for certain people, that is very, very exciting, right? To have that kind of thing. And so when I see the way that you express these ideas and the work that you're doing, I feel that you are really, really living what you are helping other people to do, because even just in your background, you have created around you an expression of those things about yourself that you have understood, acknowledged, and accepted.
You know what? I've never had anybody say that, and I'm actually kind of emotional. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I fully accept that compliment. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talk about, self-compassion and self-love and understanding ourselves. But a lot of times we get stuck, and one of your themes is get unstuck. And a lot of times we do get stuck because we go, well, how do I do that? How do I like and love myself if I don't understand myself? If I don't know myself, then how do I do that? And how do I cope with all of the hundreds of times a day where my genetic expression is at odds with the environment around me? How do I cope with that? And how do I feel empowered to change that external situation, change the environment, give away these clothes and go get clothes that do work for me instead of trying to change my body to work with the clothes that I have. And so being able to be empowered to do that, this is a really a very concrete way to be able to do something that we all think, yeah, that I should be doing that, right? Self-love, and yeah, I should be doing it. But the how, I think, is where we get stuck.
And what I appreciate most is that we really can take that holistic approach, because it is all about the awareness factor. It's about identifying who we think we are and the distorted beliefs and the parameters that we created around that. And then realizing who we really are, from a health standpoint, from a just even a spirituality standpoint. Like, what do I really want to do with my life? Do I really want to be an accountant? Nothing to say there's anything wrong with that. Or do I want to be somebody who travels the world and is a motivational speaker, which is for me like almost like a polar opposite. When we can really find all parts of what our identity really is, and we have those tools as you described, then we do have this holistic approach of, okay, now I know me and I know what I need. I know how. I have the skill sets now to be able to communicate effectively, because I know when I'm being triggered and I know how to address those triggers, because I know that while I feel like my emotions are dialed up right now, it's not because of this moment talking with my boss. It's because of how I felt, when I was 5 years old. When we have this awareness and we have the tools to deal with our stuff, that's when we can do something about it. It's taking everything and kind of packaging it, saying to somebody, you have all of the resources, everything inside of you and all of your experiences, plus all of these tools as well.
So do a lot of your clients use hypnotherapy and the blueprint stuff with you as well? Or is it sometimes split?
Yeah, I would say it's still split. I'm working on how I'm marketing and communicating myself more effectively. I do find that part difficult. Like in a conversation with you, I know you can feel it inside of me, but I really do still find it difficult to say, but I can help all of you, And so I would say a majority of my clients come to me for hypnotherapy because they really want to deal with the deep emotional aspects of what's really plaguing them. And then when I can, I try and introduce them to just the foundation of their health and how they can take back control of that. But I'm still working on that piece.
Yeah, there's such a connection there between the two pieces, and doing them separately and doing them together. That's 3 different options now when you combine them. So just really, really interesting, that combination, and how you're continuing to explore how that combination works for various people, so that when you do have the plan of this is what we do, the motion behavioral part, that it can be unique for every individual client. So tell us about AHA Healing. You are a consultant for them, and you work on early childhood trauma with them as well.
Yeah, so I think actually you might actually find this interesting, is we offer what's called a magic whiteboard session. So literally what happens is we will sit down and I'll ask you a whole bunch of questions to extract data before your 10th birthday. And in extracting that data, we're able to help you to understand the codependent triangle that you created with those people in your life in that early time period. And from that codependent triangle, we're also able to extrapolate what we call a golden triangle, which is essentially taking all of those pains that before the age of 10, you didn't really have a lot of control in the decision making, and understanding how you can turn those into your purpose. And so in doing that, we're able to help people to see fundamentally what they were born to do. And then the second aspect of AHA Healing is that we have a coaching program that allows people to go through the school so that they can learn to help others to deal with their own emotional pain. So support workers, or people who want to become coaches, for example. And then we have just the one-on-one coaching service, which again is a program that includes 3 phases that really speaks to them being able to let go, them releasing the emotional pain, and then again, taking that calling that they got from that whiteboard session and actually turning it into something that then they can do. So we've had people, as young as, I think she was 13 years old, where she started writing her book, who's become a published author. We've had others who've created movie scripts, docuseries. So there's a whole bunch. My calling was to create a program, so intellectual property program that could be offered at retreats, for instance, to help people to surrender. So how when you're trying to release all of that trauma inside of you, everybody's like, sure, well, how do I do it? Do I just find my chi and sit with it and be okay with that? Like, we always fight, that sense of being vulnerable and authentic. And so my calling at some point in time, which I haven't done yet, I fully am transparent about that, is to create some program that speaks to how people could actually surrender into the experience of letting go and shedding all of that trauma.
Wow. Okay. The magic whiteboard session sounds really interesting. So
Yeah.
you work with adults too, because I know you said you work as young as 13 to remember.
Yes, I work with 16-year-olds plus, so I don't work with children, but some of my other colleagues are certified to work with children. And then, I'll send you some information just so that you have it, and then we can connect at a different point in time. But now that I think about it, I just think you would love an experience for the Magic Whiteboard session, and I would be happy to offer you a free one so you could just try it out, see what you think.
Cool.
I got to tell you, I mean, I believe that everything is connected. And I was in a meeting this morning, and the direction was be a blank whiteboard.
Oh, cool.
And I cannot believe that you are our guest today and you do magic whiteboard sessions.
Yes.
And so it's just that's blowing my mind, but I'm not surprised. I'm just
the serendipity
excited.
Is always so cool, right?
It's so cool. So you talked about the codependent triangle of childhood. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that might look like?
Yeah, so the way that we describe it at AHA Healing is really, when you think about when you were born, right? You were born with this expectation to be loved. You cried, you expected to be nurtured, fed, changed, whatever that may be. You're expected to make eye contact, so that you could create this trust and this rapport and relationship. But somewhere before our 10th birthday, our belief is that sense of what you expected shifts. So we have this identity of we're deserving of turns into, maybe we're not worthy just as we are. And because of this event, and we call it a trauma or a big pain, but what I need people to understand is trauma, like from my perspective and from our perspective, is just really about how you take an event and you translate that into how you choose to live the rest of your life, like what that means to you as a result. So my brother was born, and I was like, they're paying all this attention to my brother. I was the firstborn, and I made all of these rules around his birth. So the 3-year difference, my pain point started at the age of 3 because I created new rules about who I had to be, because as I wasn't enough anymore, because now they were looking after him. Okay, now that was just me. But what ended up happening is, because I created this new identity for myself, I also slid into this triangulation. So Melody Beattie wrote a book, Codependency No More, I think it's called. And she talks about, the martyr, victim, and perpetrator. And so for me, I kind of slid into that martyr role and decided for myself, this was my story, that my mom was a victim and my dad didn't know how to take care of my mom. So it was my job to teach my dad how to take care of my mom. So at 3 years old, I'm deciding that my parents aren't responsible enough and that I have to become the parent in the family. And so I became the martyr and lived out the story of how I had to take care of everybody else, that everything was my responsibility, to the point where I started to make that happen for myself, where, oh, you know what, just let me do it, and I would make sure that nobody else could do it and that I was the only one, because that was the way that I could find validation for my own sense of self-worth. And that is how we create our codependent triangles and all of the stories that lead us to our experiences throughout the years.
So then once somebody does the whiteboard and has their codependent triangle, what are the next steps then after that?
Beautiful question. So first of all, there's that aha moment of going, oh, now I get it. And again, that sense of compassion, because when we have these generational trauma and cultural traumas, we kind of slide into these roles. It's not like I said, pick me, I want to become the martyr and look after all of you at the age of 3. It was more kind of how I created these distorted beliefs. And so when people can step back and go, okay, now I get why I didn't have a relationship with my dad. Now I get why I was treated the way I was by my mom. Now I get why my brother or sister or whoever is part of our triangulation, let's say, was like this. So we create this sense of awareness. And then from there, we're able to extract information from their time periods as well, when their big pain happened, so that then we can create what I mentioned to you earlier about this golden triangle. Well, we're able to help you to figure out what you were meant to do. So what were some of the things that those people in the golden triangle didn't get a chance to do because their identity shift? They never became the artist that they were destined to become because they had to be the breadwinner. And so they had to just do the job that was available to them at that time period. And they never got to cultivate that other side of them. And so we learned to extract that information so that you now can start to cultivate all what was lost from those left behind, and also cultivate what you are destined to do. It's actually pretty powerful and very emotional, I would say, too.
Wow, absolutely. It brings those pieces, those experiences and the thoughts that came with them, the understanding of that into the behaviors of now. And it sounds like it brings it both ways. So it's behavioral. There's behavioral change, which changes the way we think about things, but then there's also changing the way that we understand, then think, then feel about those things, which then changes our behavior now. And the other theme I'm hearing is, it's not too late. Sometimes we feel like that, sometimes we get into, well, this is who I am. How do you change 40, 50, 60 years of this same idea or the same thought process going through our minds?
Yeah. And it's that reframe of, clients will say, it's just not available to me, is essentially what they're saying, right? Well, they can do it. They have access to that, but it's just not available to me. The mindset, right? And it's the reframe going, but what if it was? And now that you understand this information, and now that you realize all of these experiences that you had really is that muscle that you've been developing, that resourcefulness that lives inside of you, that you've been like building to harness for a time such as this. And we tend to attract the people that we call on the bridge, the people who kind of have one foot in their ego where they're too afraid, and they're just so accustomed to the way things are. But they also have their foot on the other side of the bridge where they're like, I'm over it. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I know that something else exists for me out there, but I just don't know how to do it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up when we get off the podcast.
Yeah,
that's
fair. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of going back to the hypnotherapy stuff too, you mentioned at the beginning you got interested in that from your own counseling experiences and not wanting to be vulnerable. Did you try hypnotherapy yourself then?
Yeah, I did. I'm the type of person where you say, hey, you know what, you should try this. Like, I'll go get the certification. Like somebody said to me, oh, I think you'd make for a great Pilates instructor. And then I signed up to get the certification like 21 years ago, whatever it was, without knowing what Pilates was all about. And so what ended up happening was I had heard about hypnotherapy and decided that this was something that I felt like I was missing in what I was offering. It was taking me a long time to be able to get the results from my clients. And kind of along this same line was also when I became a personalized health coach and learned about epigenetics. So kind of all came at me at one time, where I knew my clients deserved better. I knew that I could help them to move there faster, but I didn't quite yet have the tools to do that. And so then I ended up investing in hypnotherapy to become certified. And it was through that process that I was like, oh man, I wish I would have done this a while ago. Because when my clients come to me, it's always that sense of safety and vulnerability that they just don't want to feel those feels. And that was my problem. Is it didn't matter how many times I went to the same person. I didn't like going because like, she's going to make me talk to a pillow and I have zero desire to do that, or, she's going to make me want to punch a pillow. And I honestly really don't like, I just wanted to stay very reserved and kind of protected. And she would try and pull that out of me. And whenever I did my first hypnotherapy session, I'm like, well, listen, do I have a story for you? And it was just so much easier for me to like speak my truth. And I'm like, man, I could have used this years ago. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like being able to unlock some of those things it's a step into being able to then do these other things that do require some of that understanding of ourselves. And so being able to, it's like a gateway service. We call behavioral health intervention. We call that a gateway service too. And it is that gateway service because we talk a lot about barriers to counseling, but this is one we haven't really talked about. And it is that vulnerability, being able to separate out the here and now from the previous traumatic experience. Not everybody can do that. And so when we sit in a room with a client for therapy, if we are a person who can separate that out, who can talk about the past without going into that in our minds, in our vision, in our filters, if we can do that, then great. It's helpful to talk about it. But if we can't talk about it without going into it, without living it, without flashbacking and being like, no, I feel like I am in that situation. And when I'm in that situation, I can't be problem solving. I can't be exploring or observing or understanding or experimenting with what was happening because I am back in survival mode. And I am in a panic just like I was then. And when I was 6, I couldn't solve the situation I was in. And so when I'm 38 and I go back into my 6-year-old self, I can't solve the situation that I'm in. And so, there's a phrase of the same consciousness that created the problem cannot solve the problem.
Love that. Yes.
So when we go in with that same consciousness that we were in when we experienced the situation, we can't solve, because if we could have at that time, we would have.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I remember whenever I was in a therapy session and I did start to cry and I'm like, well, there, like I did it. And I remember her saying, oh, Kristy, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm like, what? So you're right, and I guess it was that sense of lack of control. And so then going back, knowing that I would feel the fear of not being in control. And I think that manifested itself in those therapy sessions as anger. No, I wouldn't lash out, but it was still like anger where I would say, I would shut down. I'm not doing this. I'm not talking to a pillow. It's a pillow. There's nothing remotely relevant. You know what I mean? And so we'd get nowhere because she'd be trying to work through my anger now because I'd use that as an avoidance tactic.
So if somebody is interested in getting started with your hypnotherapy or any of your other services, do you serve anyone in the world, in the country? How, I know you said it was telehealth, so how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I can provide you with a link that then they can just book a 30-minute call. It's really a free call for them to talk to me about their story. It's more to find out if I can help them if they feel like they can trust me, and for them to ask any questions about any of the services. 9 out of 10, it's around hypnotherapy. And the question is, well, am I gonna like cluck like a chicken after the session? Like, what are you gonna do to me? And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and just so that everybody's clear, no, I won't get you to do that. You have to accept my suggestions. They don't work where you can't, if I say something and you don't like it, you won't accept it. So I wouldn't be here if I could suggest that you give me all of your money, right? So we would just talk, and from there, if I'm right for you, then we would just book the call and move forward with our sessions.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear how far this the research on this has come, and the practices have come. I remember when I was 19, I went to a hypnotherapist for weight loss, weight control. And that was a very different experience than what you are describing. It was me in this room with this like foam couch, and I laid on that couch, and then he would like say things, and then I would repeat what he said, and then we would record it, and then I had to listen to that later on. And it was like the episode of Friends where Chandler listens to the recording to stop smoking, but it makes him say, I'm a strong, powerful woman, right? And I don't need to smoke. And so it was very much like that. And it didn't feel very individualized.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason that, at that time I was doing that hypnotherapy. I did, I think, 5 or 6 sessions, and I was doing counseling as well. And the counseling for me at that time, as I was doing both, was so much more based on who I was and based on my experience and my situation. Whereas at that time, the hypnotherapist that I saw, it felt like a script. It just felt like, well, if you just hear these things in your own voice, it'll make a difference. And so I think that's really what drew me to the counseling versus the hypnotherapy. But what you're describing is so individualized and does bring that component that I think was missing when I did that when I was 19. So almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's the big misconception. So I get a lot of, people want to quit smoking or people want to lose weight. And I always just have to say to them, while that will be one of our points of focus, it's not going to be the main focus, because it's a coping strategy to deal with whatever the root issue is. And so for me, it was always very important that I tell them that I wanted to work on the underlying issue. And if we could address the underlying issue, we can in tandem address the behavior attached to that as well. Because then that way I felt like I was doing them a service versus trying to remove one strategy, like one coping mechanism, for them to then go into the world and figure out what they're going to fill that with, and I never felt comfortable doing that. So, I have had people say no, that they just wanted to have their smoking tendencies or habits kind of erased. And I've said no, because I also feel that it's not about me giving you a suggestion. It is about you feeling like you're ready to do this for yourself. Like, I will guide you, but you have to be willing to do the work. And for me, that work is what started all of this to begin with,
Absolutely. Because otherwise, yeah, we might stop smoking, but all of that unresolved, it's going to come up somewhere else, and potentially in something even more detrimental to our lives.
Yes.
So if you could give a suggestion to somebody on the fence about starting counseling or starting hypnotherapy, what suggestion might you give?
You know what? I would say step back, take a look at how you may be, and it's very blunt, and I apologize for anybody who's, feels like I'm not being compassionate, but I do. I want you to step back, and I want you to think about all of the ways that maybe you're normalizing, your health status, your unhappiness. I want you to think about potentially the complacency and mediocrity, that you may be living in right now, how long you may have been living like that. And the return on the investment in leaning into the discomfort of the 60 to 90 minute session. There's a big difference between the amount of time that you're going to spend feeling guilty, feeling this sense of shame, resentful, this, underlying sense of unhappiness, which then spirals into guilt for feeling unhappy, versus the discomfort that you could feel in a 60 to 90 minute session that essentially moves you past that so that you can learn to start to experience all of the positives that are absolutely available to you. But it comes down to recognizing that while the journey may not always be easy, you are always worth the effort, and you have to be your own advocate to get off the fence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. When you said people who have one foot in the ego, one foot on the other side of the bridge, we're straddling that fence. And there are so many people on the fence about starting counseling, or on the fence about starting coaching, or any type of help and support in any form. So this is great information. We would love to have you back another time. I feel like we could have filled 5 hours of discussion here. So it's a really, really interesting topic, and we've loved learning about it. So thank you so much for being here, Kristy.
Oh, honestly, thank you. I really appreciate this very much. I'm Kristy Kilcup, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.